Welcome everyone to Audubon Society of Central Arkansas's monthly meeting. I'm Dan Scheinman, the Vice President. Thanks for tuning in tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest, Matt McNair, who is the Director of Outdoor Recreation Grants Program for Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. Along with providing grant assistance and project advice to municipalities and counties in Arkansas, he has served as the Arkansas State Trails Coordinator since 2020. He is a native of Bruno in Marion County and currently lives in Little Rock, where his wife owns and operates Bella Vita Jewelry. When not serving the citizens of Arkansas in his official capacity, he enjoys gardening, hiking, canoeing, and pretty much anything else to be done in the Arkansas out of doors. And tonight he'll be talking to us about the Rails to Trails program. Take it away, Matt.
All right. Hey, thanks very much. I was pretty intimidated talking to a bunch of birders because I don't know much about birds. And so I gravitated more towards the trails part. And then I latched onto the idea of, well, I'll talk about a state park because at least I know about that. And then I see Joan Ellison pop up. And so now I'm in a pickle 3 different ways, I suppose. So now everybody gets to correct me about things. Hi, Joan. It's really nice to see you. It's a really cool surprise. So you look great. I hope you're having a good time not going to work. So anyway, I guess I should start sharing my screen now. Okay, so like Dan said, I'm going to talk about the Rails to Trails program. And as an example, I'll be using the Delta Heritage Trail State Park in eastern Arkansas, which is a cool project still underway. But I think, with my limited experience, I think that trails in general have a lot of potential to help, like bird watching as recreation, but also to restore habitat, like you were saying, pollinators especially, because they give us these corridors. But rail trails provide a really like an enhanced version of that. So we'll talk about those a little bit, and I've got a few pictures of birds people have seen on the Delta Heritage Trail, and then we'll do some questions. But without further ado, I guess I'll get started. Let me find my share my screen deal. So oh, wow. All right, is that what we need, Dan?
That's it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, good. All right. Sorry, I forgot y'all can't talk back. Okay. Birding in Delta Heritage Trail State Park. Here we go. So, as I said, I'm really intimidated by y'all because I do not know about birds. This is kind of my bird chart. I'm one of these people that's like, yeah, it's a bird, except for that big guy up at the top right. And he makes fun of me, mocks me, gets me full of seed ticks. It's awful. It's awful. I've done something bad in a past life. Turkeys mock me, but I like to chase after them all the time. So I am fascinated by birds. I just don't know a whole lot about them, except turkeys. I know a little bit more, I suppose. Anyway, so the Rails to Trails Conservancy. This is a large nonprofit organization that works at a national scale to develop rails trails. And what rails trails are multi-purpose public paths that are created from former railroad corridors. They're exactly what they sound like. And the Rails to Trails Conservancy is a massive organization that helps local communities put together funding, sponsorship, design, maintenance, and the whole 9 yards to get as many miles of abandoned rail into a trail capacity. And they even do a thing called rail banking, where they get into agreements with railroads that are not using a rail bed, but think they might in the future, but it's up in the air. And so they enter into agreements where they essentially long-term lease that rail bed. Even if it doesn't get turned into trail immediately, it keeps the rights of way and sometimes the actual railroad itself from reverting to previous ownership. And if any of y'all have ever dealt with railroads very much at all, like the deeds go back to, it's all like, handwritten with quills on parchment. It can be real squirrely what the rights of way do and hard to figure out what's going on. So keeping that process from starting is key to making future trails. So I thought that was really pretty neat. And the Rails to Trails Conservancy really pushes access and equity. Their mission statement is we're building a nation connected by trails. We reimagine public spaces to create safe ways for everyone to walk, bike, and be active outdoors. And the vision statement is trails connect everyone everywhere. I think that the access point is very important. We'll talk about that a little more as we go on. But that the word connected is a really big deal because what railroads did was connect these vast, or two different places separated by vast distances. And those rail beds remain there after all these years. And so you do get connectivity, not just from one side of town to the other or one neighborhood to the other, but sometimes across multiple states. And certainly it's not unheard of at all to have rail trails that are dozens and dozens of miles long, connecting different cities, different towns, different parts of a state or a country. The granddaddy of all the Great American Rail Trail projects is called the Great American Rail Trail. And it's pretty new as a proposal. This proposed route is what's on the screen right now. And what it's really doing is piecing together multiple trails across these, I believe that's 12 states. And you can see that some of these trails are existing and quite long. When they say planned segments, that generally means that they really are in the planning stages, not just routed out, but like they have people on the ground, both at the national level, but helping people in local communities and local trails groups obtain ownership of the rail bed line, negotiate with the railroad company, design the trail, get it up and running, and learn how to maintain it. When this thing is done, as you can see, that's 3,700 miles all the way across the country through some really beautiful country. And not only, is that an inherent good, if you ask me? Not everybody's going to get to bike 3,700 miles, but millions and millions of people all through that corridor will be directly connected to some little chunk or section. A lot of this is going to go through incredibly rural areas and very, very small towns that have seen their economies devastated by interstate corridors, for one thing, pulling things out of the downtown area, local manufacturing jobs, things like that, leaving mom and pop things leaving. And when you get people that have the resources and the wherewithal to do bike trips like this, it generates a lot of economic activity that tends to stay directly in the community, because folks that do this kind of thing generally, they don't eat at the McDonald's or stay at the Motel 6. They want an Airbnb, they want a brew pub, something, or some guy running a hot dog stand on the side of the road. So it's really a good influx of cash. And I talked in my grant capacity to my little towns in southern Arkansas about this kind of thing, because this is where our small downtowns can really see some benefit. And these are just some shots I got off the Rails to Trails Conservancy's website. This is just examples of different rail trails around the country. This Wisconsin one, of course, going up across a really cool gorge. This one is in Washington State. That's the Olympia Trail, and I believe that is actually a section of the Great American Rail Trail. So that's what you're looking at doing, is piecing together all these sections to make a full unbroken trail. This one's in New Jersey. Just a good standard rails to trail. We'll talk about this more a little bit later, but you can see how wide and flat and evenly paced it is, and it's got this really nice green corridor that it runs through. This is Ohio. This is called a rail width trail. I don't talk about these as much because it's awesome, but it's less than ideal because it is next to an active rail line, which isn't that big of a deal. It's separated, so that's great for bicycles and pedestrians, but probably less so for actual bird watching activity, because you're still going to get big loud choo-choo trains rumbling through there quite a bit, but it's still a very cool thing and a good example of the work that they do at the Conservancy. So a little closer to home is the Katy Trail, and I figure a lot of y'all have heard of that. It's the first one of these I'd never heard of. I heard of it a long time ago, and it blew my mind that this was a thing. But so this is 240 miles. You can see, it goes from St. Charles, which is north of St. Louis, crosses the Missouri River, and ends up down here in a town called Clinton, which is cool. It's a great trail, but this is one that is fully separated from roads, fully separated from active lines. And so it's I'm sure there's a couple of little connections you've got to make, but it's an unbroken trail through a wildlife corridor, essentially. And when you really look, and while some of these will go through industrial corridors, which is also great for restoring habitat, a lot of these longer ones those old rail lines were for moving grains and things like that. So what you'll get is going through really, really rural areas. And so this is just a screenshot of Google Earth. That's a rough tracing of a section of the Katy Trail. And what you see there, it's not just rural land, but it's land that's been agriculturally industrialized. And so while fields like that are great habitat for some kinds of birds, for the most part, you've got large sections of monoculture. And what that does is it provides a lot of habitat for some kinds of birds and pollinators, but greatly shrinks the biodiversity that you would have had with a series of smaller farms. But when these rail corridors go through here and they're allowed to, if you've got local groups, especially that are working to put native plants back in, native pollinators back in to encourage, butterflies and bees and other pollinators to come back in there, you've got hundreds of miles of rejuvenated and biodiverse native flora, which can really help increase the biodiversity of the surrounding area. And it's going to start connecting larger habitats on either end, because if it goes by a park or a wildlife management area or something like that, you've got a corridor where at least small critters and pollinators and things can get from point A to point B and get to a larger habitat where they can reproduce, hopefully, and keep their numbers up. I see I'm glitching a little. I don't know how that's translating with sound, but I'm going to keep plowing ahead until I hear it differently. So I'm just hitching up because I see that my monitor is going nuts. So anyway, if we're having problems, somebody chat me, because I can't tell. Anywho, all right. So closer to home, very closer to home, we've got the Delta Heritage Trail here in Arkansas. And so this is a super cool deal. The whole park is essentially a trail. It's an abandoned rail line that was obtained by the state of Arkansas in the early 90s. This is an ongoing project. There's around 45 miles complete, around 40 miles to go. And here's a map. You can see where we're detailing here. It's down here in the Delta, obviously, and eventually it's going to go from way off down here south of Rower by Arkansas City, all the way up to Lexa and Barton, which is just a little bit west of Helena, West Helena. And on the way, it goes through, as you can see in the Google Earth shot, and that yellow line is the trail. That's an actual KMZ and not my little line that I drew. It goes through a ton of monocultural industrialized ag, and it serves as a green and biodiverse corridor through there. It's also, when it's complete, going to go through the what we call the Two Rivers area, or sometimes people call it Three Rivers because of the Mississippi, but it's where the White and the Arkansas are both coming towards their confluences with the Mississippi River. This is the
We have lost you, Matt. Are you there? We'll give him a minute to come on back.
Real briefly, I mean, I'm sure you can see the deal.
This meeting is being recorded.
So it has both features that I was talking about that is a great benefit of these rail corridors, and it goes through not only tons and tons of industrialized monoculture ag, but also, when it's completed, this part isn't completed because it's such a difficult logistical feat. We'll go through the Trust and Holder Wildlife Management Area run by the Game and Fish, which abuts the White River National Wildlife Refuge, which is just a gold mine of biodiversity and birds and all kinds of cool critters. And it's just a really important natural resource that we've got there, and this is going to allow people that wouldn't normally get to see it because of some of the unique things that a rail trail brings to the table as far as a recreational facility goes. And so one of the reasons I think that folks that are into birding, not just increasing their habitat, but folks that are into looking at birds would really benefit from rail trails and find them to be have such great potential for watching birds. First, like they are dedicated bicycle pedestrian multi-use paths. There are lots and lots of trails, and I think they're all beneficial to wildlife and to birds. But the best ones are the ones that are fully separated from roadways because you get away from traffic and the noise and the pollution of traffic, and also with birds, you get a lot of bird kills from traffic, as y'all are well aware. But with a rail trail, you go a step further because rail lines tend to be way off from where the roads eventually come. And so you really get far, far away from all these other dangers to birds and to humans and things that disrupt natural patterns and disrupt folks from seeing birds and enjoying themselves in nature. And again, it develops this just green canopy, this corridor through multiple habitats. Rail trails also have incredibly safe and accessible surfacing. Trail services vary, and some trails are easier to get onto than others, but rail trails, especially the ones that are built by the Rails to Trails Conservancy or sponsored by them, they are like radically accessible. They put a lot of time and effort into making sure people of all different abilities can access their trails and use their trails. And I'm thinking with being a rail bed, they're also wide, they're flat, they're gently sloped. They are just easy to get from point A to point B on, regardless of your ability on a bicycle, on your feet. They're very accessible for wheelchairs, people in walkers with crutches. And I mean, I'm not real familiar with what all you drag around to bird watch, but I mean, it makes it easy to carry bulkier equipment with you if you had a big camera or even a tripod. It's much easier than a hike on, say, a backwoods type of trail. It's just set up for that kind of thing. And it's also, it draws compatible users and user groups. These trails, like they're long and flat and really cool, but they're not ideal for fast or aggressive riding. So, I mean, some folks are going to mountain bike on them. Some folks are going to ride those street bikes where they come flying by you on the left and they're trying to get 30 miles an hour and just go as hard as they can. But you don't get a lot of it. You're getting a lot of people that are just tootling around. Like, for instance, at the Delta Heritage State Trail headquarters, like, we rent beach cruisers out. You see a lot of people on beach cruisers just kind of tootling around. Rail trails tend to have lots of benches, periodically spaced benches where you can just chill out, sit, be quiet. And also, if not a specialized wildlife viewing platform, they'll have big turnouts where you can stop and really sit and watch and listen for a long time. And back again to habitat. These rural rail lines especially, they traverse vast stretches of commercial and row crop ag production. And so by letting those corridors revert back to their natural form and helping them along, ideally by making sure that invasives are kept out, natives are put back in, you get recovery of a lot of lost habitat that went away when we switched to monocultural row crop farming, and you increase the biodiversity that's compromised by that industrialized monoculture. And at the same time, this will create wildlife corridors through monocultural habitats that connect multiple larger habitat areas. And you'll see that on the Delta Heritage Trail, not only that great big wildlife habitat I was pointing out earlier, but smaller rivers and things that it goes by where that row crop ag hasn't been able to take all the way up to the banks. And so you'll connect these larger areas of native habitat through a native plant stocked corridor. It allows for a lot of movement, especially of birds and pollinators. In the case of the Katy Trail and the Delta Heritage Trail, with particular interest to this group, both of those things run through sections of the Mississippi River Flyway. Like it's right in the gut of it. And so I've got an illustration here. Oh no, see, I've got a moving duck. It's probably messing up my screen. I'll stop him. I hate that for him though. Uh-oh. Go back. Where you at, little duck? All right, so dadgummit. Sorry, y'all. All right, so you can see here, this is the Mississippi River Flyway, the Atlantic Flyway, and this is a blow up of Arkansas and Missouri. The Katy Trail is here. The Delta Heritage Trail is here, and it's just smack dab in the middle of these flyways. And so you're right where you need to be to see, migratory waterfowl. So the Delta Heritage Trail, it's a work in progress. It's been underway since 1992. We've got the north and south ends of it complete, and that's around 44 and a half miles total. And they've got trailheads with facilities on Highway 49 at the headquarters of the park, just west of Helena, West Helena on 49. And they've got one in Arkansas City that has a bathroom and other facilities. There are multiple other trailheads along the way that are very accessible, easy to get to if you've got a map and can go, but they're not going to have facilities. The middle section will go through the Trust and Holder WMA and the White River National Wildlife Refuge on elevated trestles. And to my knowledge, every bit of that is going to be on elevated trestle, and that's why this is the last section to get completed. It costs multiple millions of dollars per mile to get a trail in this kind of terrain. And it's also going to cross the Yankopin Bridge over the Arkansas and the Benzal Bridge over the White, both of which are really well-known bridges and things that a whole subculture of people that really dig looking at old bridges. And these two bridges are always on folks' list. I've been looking around. Lots of people talk about them, blog about them. But right now you can't get on or authorized to, or you're sneaky. I've been up on the Yankopin. I don't think I was supposed to be there, but I got up on there. It's pretty wild. And when it gets done, it's going to be a global destination. It's going to be amazing. And all that area around it, that WMA is public land. I don't know if I've got any hunters in here, but like that is deep backwoods wetlands in there, and it's not very accessible for the average person. It's hard to get around in there. It's easy to get lost. If you're not a hunter, it can be really intimidating because that's what people are doing out there. And if you don't already know, you're probably going to feel comfortable going. This trail is going to allow people to see a primeval wetland, and it's not going to disturb people that hunt down there because it's going to be up over these elevated trestles, and it's going to allow for a nice, quiet recreational activity that's not going to disturb a pre-existing recreational activity and cause user group conflicts. So I think it's just going to be amazing when it's done. I can't wait. Most of the trail though is going to be crushed gravel surfacing, which is it might as well be pavement. It's really accessible for wheelchairs, bicycles, really fit people that are not as fit. People that have mobility issues are going to be able to get around on this as easy as they could the pavement. It's really, really cool, really blends in with the landscape. And like a lot of trail, it does have several benches, lots of wildlife viewing potential. And it's also got a lot of historical markers and signage along it because, there's a lot of Civil War activity out there. And also the rail line itself, after it was integral in the Civil War. There were several skirmishes fought out there because of the fights to control rail lines. But after that, it was an important passenger rail that connected Helena and Memphis to the rural communities south of there, notably Elaine, and then on down to Arkansas City. And so there's tons and tons of history, and we'll talk a little bit more later about some of these other activities, but somebody to help me with my pictures on this and is our interpreter down there. His name is Ryan Smith, and he's a birder, but he's also a railroad history expert, and so he can take you out and tell you story after story after story about this rail line and the passenger rail that it provided for people that were back then in the 10s, 20s, 30s, like really cut off from the rest of the world. I mean, it was hard to get from Elaine to anywhere else in 1910. And so there's just tons of history and photographs along the trail and kiosks and Ryan's noggin. He's really super cool. And so there's a lot of things to do on that trail along with birding. And I've got a flyer to show you all later. There is a guided tour, a couple of them coming up on an Oxbow Lake that Ryan's going to guide, and I'll tell you about that later. And there are plenty of birds. So Ryan sent me all these pictures of birds, and so I've got some pictures of these birds, and I can't identify them because you saw my little ID poster, but I thought I'd show you some pictures of the infrastructure that you'll see on the trail. This bottom picture is our headquarters, and so that's one of the places with facilities. That's on the northern end of the trail. On the southern end of the trail, you've got the other town, that's at Arkansas City. So these also have restroom facilities, and of course there's places to eat and stuff in Arkansas City. It's one of the towns that we're hoping sees a real big boost in visitors and tourism as this thing comes on fully online, where you can get all the way through it. This is going to be up at the top right hand corner, much more typical of a trailhead you'll see on the Arkansas Delta Heritage Trail. You've got ample parking and a place to get out from under the rain if it's raining on you, but you can see it's got a lot of informative signage here. I can see this is a picture of one of them old passenger trains, I think, so it's going to have history all the way from pre-European settlement all the way up to when this was a passenger rail, and nearly up to living memory for some folks. And we've got lots of those in our little towns up and down the trail. This is Barton Trailhead. That's also the northern terminus where the headquarters is. You can see it's in wintertime. So, the gate's closed. This is a pretty big snow, but we don't normally close it just because it's winter. So you can go out there in the wintertime and see wintertime birds. And this is just a shot of the rail bed, and that'd be crushed gravel stone underneath, but it's just a snow-covered canopy, and that's what it looks like. If you're not in the wetland sections on those trestles, that's what it looks like. It's a straight shot for the most part, but it's an amazing sight because it just canopies out, and you can see that there's a substantial right-of-way on either side, and so there's a pretty large buffer of mixed hardwoods and native plants and pollinators between the trail and the row crop ag that's going to be on either side of those rights of way. And so once you add that to 80 miles, that's a significant amount of habitat that connects to other even larger pieces of habitat. So we can't underestimate the benefits to biodiversity that are represented by rail trails in general and the DHT in particular. This is the same kind of shot, just in the summertime. So, like you can see, it's a wide trail. The trail varies from a bare minimum of 8 feet in some places, but it's generally going to be at least 12, all the way up to 15 or 18, depending on where you're at. But unless you're going over a water body, you're also going to have this gentle slope on either side. So that is a real gentle slope. And even if you don't want to stay in the middle of the trail and get in people's way while you're maybe waiting for a bird or slipping off to try and get in there and set a camera up, like there's plenty of places to just stop and chill out, sit next to a tree or set up a camera. If you really want to post up and try to catch a bird, look at a bird. this is an example of the bridges we have. So this is not the raised trestle I was talking about that goes through Trust and Holder. These are the bridges you'll see that go over the multiple, they're basically drainage ditches. They're canals that drain the big bodies of monocultural ag, which is its own kind of problem. However, with a rail trail, and you have this corridor maintains, which helps filter out some of those things from the fields, and also allow for a little bit of rewinding of those stream beds, which have been channelized into ditches. So even without active manipulation, you start to see that habitat revert back to what it would have been before we came through. I'm not knocking people that farm out there for a living. I don't want it to be that, but like there are issues with industrialized monoculture that we need to address. And actually, like re-winnowing a channel is beneficial to farms. You can show it with numbers, but it's hard to convince folks sometimes if they've been taught otherwise. So anyway, I think this just represents not only a material benefit, but maybe a psychic one as well, as new generations of farmers see the benefits to having that wildlife corridor, and maybe like bees out there, pollinators out there, which we need for all kinds of agriculture, even monoculture. So it's just something we need to really cherish. So one of the few places that it's not an actual set aside trail is on the levee outside of Arkansas City. That's where this is. I might have been on this ride. This was right when that trailhead opened. And this is just some folks riding down the levee. So you might have vehicular traffic on the levee, but it's very few and far between. And again, this is about the only place you're going to ride on the quote-unquote road on the Delta Heritage Trail. And if you don't want to do that, you can just skip up to the first little trailhead, and that's only a couple miles up the road. This is another shot of one of those bridges that goes across a channel. Used to be a creek, it's been channelized. You can see it's starting to re-winnow itself, which is really neat. What we've done is build a new bridge on top of the old existing trestle where the train would have crossed. It's really, really cool. You can go down the trail and see some of this old architecture that actually supported the train when it was really running. And if you've got somebody like Ryan with you, he can actually tell you about it. I can tell you the superficial thing that you can probably see for yourself, but he's the expert. So if you ever get down there, you should look him up. He's happy to talk about it. This is a shot of the Yankopin Bridge over the Arkansas River. The Yankopin, I believe, I think there are 3 full spans that spin on this, and that's one of the things that people are obsessed with about it, because not many of these turnstile bridges had 3. I know it's got 2 for sure. Maybe it's 2 turnstiles with 3 or 4 spans, but it's an amazing thing. And when I went out there, I slipped off down under the bridge, and I was with I probably shouldn't tell everybody how I got down there, but I got up on that bridge being stealthy and saw down it. It's amazing. It's an amazing sight. I'm sure it's a rite of passage if you grow up down there to go all the way across, but I was too chicken to get all the way across it. This guy, up to no good. As you can see, once again, turkeys are in play. That's on the Yankopin up there. A turkey's probably roosting up there. So if you hear him, don't go up there. He's trying to lure you off like a siren against the rocks. He'll dump you off the side of that bridge. Hateful creature. And this is the Benzol Bridge over the White River. This is a raising and lowering bridge. Also really cool. Going to be incredibly expensive to get online, but again, you can see out in the horizon on both of these bridges just the immense amount of completely wild bottomwood timber. This would have been part of what we used to call the big woods back before we drained the delta and the swamps. And so it's an amazing place, and again, very hard to get to and very hard to get around in. And I would hate to see it really developed, but by doing it this way, you can let people get out there and see it without having to actually disturb ground inside of the actual wildlife management area or the wildlife refuge. which again, this is the part. I mean, I think people will come from all over the planet to see. I think people will fly in from other countries to ride this trail when this part gets done. It is going to be amazing. Here's just some of the surrounding terrain you'll see there. There's one of our historical markers about a skirmish. It's another shot of that snow. You'll see row crop ag. That on the left, I think, is a soybean field. On the right, you've got corn that's just been harvested. So you'll see the growing seed. If you go out there multiple times, you'll see the growing seeds as it goes through. And even though it is monoculture, like there are different things being grown. They do crop rotate. So you might see cotton one time you go. You might see corn the next, soybeans the next. If you get lucky, you'll see a soybean, or rather a sunflower rotation, which is an amazing sight if you've never seen an entire field of that magnitude planted in sunflowers as a rotation crop. It's something to see for sure. And a lot of it's going to be submerged hardwoods, especially once you get into Truss and Holder and the wildlife refuge. You're going to see a lot of this. There's not as much of it on the sections we've got finished now, but you will see some. There's a couple of little oxbows off of the trail. So you'll see a lot of submerged timber, these big cypress trees, and so that attracts all kinds of birds. And so we got birds. So now all these are just birds to me. So I'm sure everybody knows what all these birds are. I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures. These are all given to me actually yesterday. I cold called Ryan yesterday about pictures. I'm like, oh gosh, I should get some pictures. And I don't think he was even at work. I think he drove in to get me these pictures. So it was the play of the day, in my opinion. It was really awesome of him. And so I'm just going to run through, show you a few pictures of birds because, I figured that was the bag around here was birds. If y'all saw the labels of these pictures, y'all crack. I think this is Little Bird on Mossy Branch is what I labeled it as because I thought it was good. There's another little bird. Woodpecker, I know that one. And a robin in a pine tree, all different kinds of trees. A couple of cardinals in some snow. Cardinal on a fence rail on the trail. Another little bird on a bench or a trail or a rail rather, and a very serious looking bird. And so that's really the present. Before I take questions though, Dan's got this flyer that y'all can access, but this is the Ryan asked me in return for giving me the pictures if I would tell y'all about the Old Town Lake kayak tours. Old Town Lake is well, I can pull it up on a map later if y'all want to see it, but it's a couple of miles off the trail. But State Parks is going to do a guided tour of this Oxbow Lake. It's not really big, but it's Oxbows are natural lakes and full of flooded timber. They're really neat if you've never been on one before. You can see that April 23rd and May 14th is actually a little bit late for me in Oxbow. There's a lot of snakes and other critters like that down in there. So if you're squeamish, bear in mind you might see a snake or 9. But March 19th, April 23rd, of course, March 19th is gone. May 14th to September 10th. All this info on the flyer, you can get a hold of DHT and they'll get you set up. And that's Ryan there on the right. One of the best interpreters we've got working out there. He sends us these cool updates about the Delta Heritage Trail every few weeks. And like I said, he's a wealth of knowledge about both birds and railroads. So if you catch him at the DHT headquarters and get a chance to go walking with him, I would take it just to hear some of the stories he's got. So anyway, that's it for that part, and I'll take questions if we're able to even talk or any of that. Oh, I had a final slide, but it's not in there. That's okay, though. Oh, wait.
Well, thank you, Matt. Very informative, and thanks for sticking through things. So
Thank you.
if you have questions, you can either type them in the chat and I'll relay them, or you can take yourself off of mute and ask your question. Now, I will start with a question off of chat. Are the rails left in place anywhere for better access to an aging population?
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Could you repeat the last part of the question, please? I'm sorry.
Are there rails that are, I guess the train rails left in place anywhere to provide better access?
No, the actual rails are not the rails that the trains rolled on. I mean, they're replaced by paths. I don't think the rails themselves would be very helpful for anyone with a mobility issue. Now, if you're talking about like guardrails, if there were original ones, no, but a lot of places there are going to be rails on either side, especially if there's a water body at all. So you would be able to, hold on to that. But other than that, no, there's no rails left once the trail goes in.
Is the rail infrastructure removed long ago when the train line is decommissioned, or is that something that the rails to trails team has to deal with?
I believe, in my experience, and I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty exactly what happened on every mile of the DHT or what happens every time, but in my experience with rail lines, just in other instances, if they relinquish control of the land, they're going to come through and get that metal. Now, they'll leave everything else. And so like you saw those old trestles, so there'll be support infrastructure for your trail when you're going across the water bodies, but they'll take the metal. They reuse that. The other pieces of infrastructure, though, that are useful is especially like on the Delta Heritage Trail, which was an old, an old rail, an old passenger line, and an old supply line. It's old enough that it's got to have a depot around every 8 to 10 miles because the original trains would have been steam trains. They would have need water and wood to resupply, and then of course pick up mail and whatnot. So when you obtain the rail line, you have a nice expanded section at every town that has already been cleared and usually has a slab there, and it's a really handy spot to put a trailhead. It's always got county road access, and oftentimes a lot of the infrastructure you need for a trailhead for parking, bike locks, signage is already there, and that comes with the rail bed. That's part of the footprint. So that's kind of a neat thing that's left over.
Well, speaking of those Delta towns, have they been vocal supporters of the Delta Heritage Trail?
Yeah, some of them have. It's less the smaller towns than the county judge, the county judges in those counties, the local representatives. Now towns like Arkansas City, yeah, but there's at least one person that lives there that's intimately familiar with how all this works, and he is very aware that it's going to be a great thing, for that town, and he's got a lot of pull. I think with your itty bitty towns, it's probably going to take. People aren't against it, but I think they're going to have to really see some activity before they fully grasp the potential for it. Somebody that might not have a voice, though, if I was a little kid or a young person that didn't have a license yet, that lived in one of them itty bitty towns, I would be tickled to death to have somewhere I could ride my bicycle to the next little bitty town up and hang out with my buddy and not have to get out on the county road and ride my bicycle. So I bet they're pretty tickled about it. But we haven't had a whole lot of big support from the smaller towns, but like Elaine and Arkansas City especially are all over it. And then like people at the county level are very supportive and enthusiastic.
Cool. Do you know if there's going to be Cache River access for canoes and kayaks off the Delta Heritage Trail?
We don't have it planned for us. I'm pulling up a map so I can see exactly where I can make a guess. Like we don't have anything planned about that right now. But right now, the main goal is to get it finished. I mean, it's been dragging on for decades, and State Park's just got a pretty big chunk of funding from the Walton Foundation to try and finish this out. And so that's going to be the main thing, is getting it through the wildlife management areas. And then we'll probably turn to other access points. You can access the cache at other places. Sorry, my Google Earth's taking a long time to load. I'll put a pin in that question, and maybe, Dan, I can get back to you on that. I don't have a very good answer. I can tell you, though, that it'll be highly unlikely that there will be any direct access points in Trust and Holder or White River National Wildlife Refuge, because there are other regulations at play there. You're allowed to go in. However, turning dirt in one of the, constructing anything at all outside of that rail bed is going to be a regulatory nightmare. And also for a wildlife management area, the Game and Fish requires you to have you fill out a little permit to go in. Basically, they want you to go in at certain points where you can pull this free permit out of their little box and fill it out and have it on you. It doesn't cost money, but they try to control the access points. So there are plans, though, to build tent pads at certain places in those in the refuge and in the wildlife management area inside the footprint of the rail bed. That's been talked about, so people can tent camp as they bicycle through there. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, I hope.
What's the
And so,
desire?
I'll try to get a better answer about the Cache River thing and get it back to you so you can share it with the group.
What's the desired time frame for finishing the last section of the trail?
Oh my goodness. I mean, as soon as possible, but if I gave a prospective endpoint, there would be a disturbance in the forest, and I think the entire planning and development team would come in here and skin me alive. It'll be a while. We don't have a projected goal. It's all hands on deck. Actually, Joan might know. Are you about to tell me, Johnny?
I haven't heard yet, and it's going to be dependent on funding.
Yeah. Well, we did receive $20 million pledge from the Walton Family Foundation. So that's where the big push is going to come from, to try and get those elevated
Funding.
trestles and those bridges sewn up. I mean, it's full steam ahead, but I mean, even building a regular trail, like any construction project like this, it's, you can say when you're going to get done, and then it's, Lord willing, the creek don't rise territory. And it's even worse when you're dealing with bridges of that magnitude, the core, and just the intense web of regulations that you deal with in a sensitive wetland area, sensitive wildlife area, and then two major commercial rivers.
The bridges.
So, I don't have an end date. I hope it's soon, though.
Gotcha. Other questions? You can unmute yourself or type them in the chat. All right. Well, you mentioned you showed the Lick Creek access, and that's one of the places that I've been on. First of all, this chapter has birded a portion of the Delta Heritage Trail from.
I knew it.
And then I've been on two other sections, but I've done so because I was looking for evidence of dicamba herbicide symptoms on native plants on the trail. The Lick Creek access is one of the places where I've found it 3 years in a row, and it's really bad. So it's nice to have so many native plants in the Great Wildlife Corridor, but that row crop agriculture does have an impact on that relatively narrow strip of wildlife habitat.
Amen.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes these projects valuable, though. I mean, specifically rural rails to trails projects, because if we can, every little thing that we can do to make it worth more people's while to not skirt those dicamba regulations, for example, like when some of these towns that And one of the reasons these towns are itty bitty ain't got nothing is because it's not because of agriculture, it's because it turned into mechanized agriculture. Like that's what all the jobs were, was ag. But when you consolidate farms and industrialize it, only a very few people have jobs out of ag, and everybody else gets left in the lurch. And if those smaller towns start seeing economic benefit from that trail, then that trail becomes associated with efforts to curtail, illegal spray of dicamba or toughen regulations on it. I think that can only be helpful. And as those farms go through different generations and the younger folks take over, like just incrementally, maybe they think, it's maybe they've got a store in town. Maybe they're making money that way. And so we just chip away and chip away and chip away. But but like you say, also it provides a really handy spot for, you're not a citizen scientist, like you're a legit scientist, but like citizen science programs to be out taking notes and just having to be out there and see evidence of dicamba usage and turn it into somebody like you who can look and see if that's inside or outside of the regulatory window. They can see fish kills, they can document things that we're trying to mitigate with the trail. So making it so easy to access from multiple points and easy to walk around and carry stuff like cameras and notepads and things, I think would help citizen science initiatives, which would help, all of our jobs and like yours especially, keeping up with that kind of thing.
Excellent point.
I think you might want to consider the implications of, if people are out there documenting that, the local establishment may not appreciate it and may actively try to keep people off those sections of the trails if it becomes a problem, because it's going to threaten their lifestyle. Has that happened in any of the other rural areas?
No, so the section on the levee, now that's a levee that doubles as more of a road, but so not on the Delta Heritage Trail, but the Delta Heritage Trail is going to connect to the wider network of the Great River Trail, Great River Road, and the Mississippi levee trails. And so in places where the levee boards have allowed trails to go on levees, where those levees are not next to like Arkansas City, but are out in the middle of people's farmland, there have been some pretty dicey encounters. That's a little bit different. You haven't had anybody with the pesticide thing, and I wouldn't anticipate that as much as I would, because like you're right about this deal of folks not wanting you out there documenting what they're doing and all that. That's very real. I would be a little less concerned in this case just because there's a pretty high level of controversy within the agricultural community regarding dicamba and other regulatory issues with pesticides. I'm not saying your concerns are unfounded. Like that could definitely happen, but it might not be as severe as other kind of like, what are you doing on my land type of things are. And also, even though it's been slow going getting this thing done, it has been a going concern since '92. So people have had 30 years to get used to it. Now, if you're running around with a shirt that says the dicamba police and you've got a camera and a notepad, then you're probably asking for trouble. But I think that everybody's pretty well used to everybody out there now. Of course, state parks has a big presence. You've got rangers going up and down there every once in a while. So people have had time to get accustomed to the trail in the Delta Heritage Trail.
I try to keep a low profile out there. Any other questions before we finish?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for sharing everything about Rails to Trails and the status of the Delta Heritage Trail. And thanks everyone for tuning in and for your patience during the technical glitches. So
sorry about thanks y'all. Had a great time. Well, I'll see some of y'all later, Jay. So good to see you.
You too.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you, Matt. Thank you.